Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome to another episode of Sri's Daily COVID-19 Show. My name is Sri Srinivasan. I'm the Marshall Loeb Visiting Professor of Digital Innovation at Stony Brook School of Journalism on Long Island in New York State. I'm on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, where it's 7 p.m. Eastern Time, and you can hear out my window at this moment the salute to healthcare workers. People are banging pots and pans, clapping, making noise, and let's all take a moment in our lives to reflect on the healthcare workers and other frontline staff that have made it possible for so many of us to survive this crisis. And that includes first responders, it includes grocery store clerks, it includes delivery drivers, men and women who are putting their lives at risk for all of us. Thank you for watching. Please share this with your family and friends right now. We're live on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and LinkedIn. On each of these platforms, please hit share. Please hit retweet. Tell folks to join us so that we can have this global conversation around COVID-19. We have a very special episode for you tonight. We're going to leave Manhattan. I'm here, and we're going to bring in folks from a few miles north of New York City. We're going to the state of Connecticut, and Connecticut is an important state that's just near to New York, and we have some special guests from there. Let me tell you who's going to be joining us. We have three fabulous guests. Reverend Carl McCluster will be here from Shiloh Baptist Church. In Shiloh Church, BPT is .org is the website. We're also joined by a state representative, Cara Rochelle, and she's from Ansonia and Derby in Connecticut. Her Twitter handle is Cara Rochelle CT, and she's also on Instagram, Cara Rochelle 4CT. We'll also be joined by Pastor Yolanda Hernandez of IDD Centro de Vida in Bridgeport, Connecticut, and you will meet all of them in just a minute. But first, please tell us where you're watching from, and please share this show. This is episode number 73 of my show, and that means we've been live for 73 straight days because the lockdown in New York has been there for 73 days, weekends and everything else, and it wouldn't have been possible without the support of my producers. We want to thank Rose Horowitz. She's Rose Horowitz 31 on Twitter, and also Vandana Menon, Vandana_Menon on Twitter. These two ladies have been with us for 73 days, working so hard to produce incredible guests like these, and we're very, very grateful. So please follow them, please tag, please share, and comment and tell us where you're watching from. Just before we bring on our guests, I want to thank our sponsors. And today we want to tell you about Muck Rack Academy, fundamentals of social media for journalists, PR pros, and everyone. This is a free certification course that I am teaching in June. It's free for every single person in the world, and you can save your seat right now by going to muckrack.co/social. mrac.co/social, mrac.co/social. Please check it out, mrac.co/social, a free course that anybody in the world can participate in, and it's free because we want you to benefit from this chance to learn about social media, and you will have a baseline understanding of what is happening new in Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Instagram. Check out this website, mrac.co/social, and please tell your friends. People of all ages are welcome, as well as people who are working in different industries and also any experience level. We've had more than 3,000 people sign up already, and we're going to keep going, and the course launches in June. So my colleague Linda Bernstein and I are working very hard to bring you this free course, and we're very grateful to the folks at Muck Rack for making that possible. All right, we're ready to talk about Connecticut, and let me bring in our guests. We are very grateful to them for being here with us. So please say hello. Hi.
Hi.
Hey, everybody.
Thank you very much for being here. Let's introduce everyone again. Pastor Yolanda, Representative Cara, and Pastor Carl. And let's start with Pastor Yolanda. Thank you very much for being here. I ask all our guests, how are you doing? How is your family? Let's start with you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me tonight. It was a pleasure. It's a pleasure to be here with each and every one of you. Our family is doing great. We are on lockdown, as everyone is, but we are doing good. We are doing good. So I'm grateful to God for that. And I'm grateful for the authorities that also are doing their job to keep each and everyone safe.
Thank you very much. Let's go to Representative Cara Rochelle.
Hi, everybody. First, I want to thank you for having me on today. This is such an important thing to shine a light on all the work that's being done by various people to support people, members of the public during COVID. My family's doing well. Thank you for asking. You know, your family doing well and your friends doing well is all you can, you know, is the most important thing right now. So thank God for that. And I'm just humbled that I get to work so hard for the people in the community right now. I'm a freshman lawmaker, and so I got into this to really serve the public, and I'm glad to be able to work with others to do that. And
tell us what that means as a lawmaker, a state representative.
So in the state of Connecticut, there's 151 state reps across the state and 36 senators. So we come together as the Connecticut General Assembly and we pass laws. But in addition to passing laws, we also do advocacy for our residents and a lot of case management. And now that COVID has occurred, it's not physically safe for us to be in Hartford, but we are doing a tremendous amount of case management. I get up early in the morning and go until late at night with reaching out to members of the community and supporting them, getting information out to them. So people contact about, you know, problems they're having with their unemployment benefits or navigating the healthcare system if they lost their healthcare, or, you know, they have a small business and they need to figure out supports for that. And so we're doing a lot of work, especially with all of the evolving situation of COVID and the evolving rules about COVID as we try to address the healthcare crisis and the economic crisis and carefully reopen. You know, there's a lot to navigate. And so we've really been kind of the conduits between the folks on the ground and communicating that to the governor's team and saying, hey, this is what we need for our residents, or this is what our residents need for support. So we are the go-between, and we're the mouthpiece and the amplifier for our residents in the community.
Oh, we look forward to talking to you more about that. Let's go to Pastor Carl.
Hi there, Carl McCluster from Shiloh Church in Bridgeport, Connecticut. So glad to be. My family is doing fine. My kids are fine. My wife is fine. The church family is fine. Our community is not doing as well as it could be doing. Pastor Yolanda and I are the ones that end up sort of on the front line. We work together through many different collaborations, working with the governor on trying to get a reopening for houses of worship at the appropriate time. We do all kinds of other things. Martin Luther King Corridors Initiative, doing redevelopment of the neighborhoods and communities where Martin Luther King's streets are named after Dr. King. But really right now we're just trying to help bridge the gap, working with people like Representative Rochelle and others to try to make sure that the services are there for our seniors. We are we're the end of the road in some way, as we are in the beginning. We work with the kids and youth, but also when people die of this crisis, then we end up standing there with the family, trying to navigate these waters of death and difficulty. So on one hand, it's a joyful job to serve and to be able to work with representatives like Representative Rochelle and other great leaders in our state, lots of other community leaders besides Pastor Yolanda and ourselves. But really, the hardest part of it, I think, is watching people die, in some cases needlessly, is what I would say.
And that's very tragic, and we will talk about that in just a few minutes. Thank you, Pastor. I thought we would start with a basic look at Connecticut because we have this global audience as we show you here in just 1 second. We are just grateful to everyone for being here. And let's see. So we just want to show everyone who's watching. There's New York, and here is Connecticut. And you're seeing it's a state that's north of New York City. You can see Long Island over here. And some quick facts. Connecticut is a U.S. state in southern New England that is a mix of coastal cities and rural areas dotted with small towns. And so there are many different kinds of places there, right? You've got in one state, you've got a mix of that rural and city landscape. You've got cities like Hartford and Bridgeport and Stamford are all there. And also you have rural areas. So it's important for people to understand. So now what we're going to do is we're going to do what we call our global tour as we look at where people are checking in from. Sonali says she salutes healthcare workers as we do all. Frontline heroes, she says. She's watching over on LinkedIn. Rose is here. Rose Horowitz 31. This is going to be exciting and important show. Please follow and amplify her. Rose Horowitz 31. She's tweeting right now, everybody. My dad is watching in Kerala, India. Hi, Dad. We love you. I'm sorry that we're not together. I would have come to visit, but here we are. He's awake, by the way, at 4:30 in the morning in India. So we will chastise him for that later, for doing that. Rose is saying how our state representative said she has worked with United Way. Our colleague Neil Parekh does a lot of work with United Way. He is the head of internal communications there. And another Sonali is checked in from LA, which is great. And Seishu is watching from Connecticut. Tell us where you're watching from, folks. And Representative Rochelle is from Ansonia and Derby, which he told me has one of the worst unemployment rates in Connecticut right now. And we'll get to that issue. Yazda is watching and says, blessings, Pastora Yolanda Hernandez. That's great. We're seeing all these comments coming in. And we have Jason Rojas watching from Westerly, Rhode Island. So I want to make sure that all our guests also had a chance to share on Facebook right now and on Twitter so that their families, their friends around the world can join us. Let's go to Pastor Yolanda. And if you can just tell us a little bit, Pastor, about life right now under COVID. What is happening in your church right now?
Well, ever since this started, of course, we have been on lockdown. We have been doing a lot of work. I think we've worked more now than we've ever worked before. Before, we used to have our church services only on Tuesdays, sometimes on Thursdays and Sundays. Now with this coronavirus, we do a lot of FaceTime Live, and we are able to do it Tuesdays, Thursdays, Friday with the youth, Saturday with the children, and Sunday morning. So as you could see, we are doing more, trying to get connected or making sure that the people, the congregants, the members are connected with the church. This is not something that is easy for the church because we're so used to being together. We're so used to being at the church during the services, doing what we do best, which is serve the Lord and praise Him. But because of this, coming or this being, we had to change everything, and it's been a tiring moment because we've been working more. We've been servicing also the community, a community around the church, which is basically 95% of Hispanics. So we've been also trying to connect with them so they will know that there is a church that even though our doors are closed, we are still there to help them in any way we can, being with meals or being just with words of encouragement. There has been many people throughout this time that have been depressed, discouraged, afraid. I mean, fear has been the number one thing that has embraced a lot of the family. So we have just been there to give them words of encouragement, to tell them that they're not alone, that there is hope, and that pretty soon our doors will be open up again and we'll be able to connect again. We'll be able to do more than we have been doing. So it's been a challenging time. It's been very challenging for us as a family. It's been challenging for the church. We've been at our church for 30 years. So we know what it is and, how the community has been affected throughout these months. So it hasn't been easy. But we're surviving and we're praising for that. And we're doing a lot of prayer and really just hoping for the best.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to read some data around how Connecticut is being affected by all this. The data shows that Black and Hispanic residents are more than 2 times as likely to test positive for COVID-19, and 1 out of every 3 positive test results have, even though they don't have a race or ethnicity filled out. Connecticut has the 5th highest share of cases coming back, and so among the 39 states that report the breakdown, according to Solutions Journalism Network. Let me ask our state representative here, Representative Cara Rochelle, can you talk about the situation on the ground? How are you helping your constituents, and how are they dealing with this? The understanding for those of us who are lay people, not familiar with Connecticut, it sounds like it's a very rich state with lots of very rich enclaves, but talk about the reality and what it's the full picture.
So Connecticut is a state of I guess you could say paradoxes. It actually has the highest discrepancy between rich and poor in the whole nation. And so while we do have the Gold Coast that has, Fairfield County is the wealthiest county per capita in the entire world, we also have a lot of areas that are in very deep distress. We have areas with extremely high poverty rates. Areas like sections of Bridgeport and Waterbury and New Haven and Hartford, and also areas like mine. People think about the smaller towns and they don't necessarily think of the poverty levels and the economic distress. But even prior to this crisis, there's a United Way designation called ALICE, and ALICE stands for Asset Limited, Income Constrained, and Employed. So these are your working poor residents, the people that are living paycheck to paycheck, that are having trouble making ends meet for their basic bills. And in my district, prior to this crisis, that rate was 60% of my residents that were working paycheck to paycheck. And so on the ground in my community, and I'm sure that we are not the only community with these issues, what we're seeing is that, when the paycheck to paycheck ends and the paycheck stops, people are immediately falling into poverty. One of the first things I did when this crisis hit was I contacted our local nonprofit, it's a quasi-public agency that coordinates with all of the food banks. And I called them and I said, I know that our volunteers at these food banks typically are retirees. How can I help you to get more volunteers? And so I immediately put a call out to our community and said, we need young and healthy people to staff these food banks, because if ever there was a time of need, it's now. And so things are happening in a real-time way for folks out here, trying to get folks situated. I've gone and personally dropped off bags of food to residents and coordinated to get folks, to drop off groceries for them and things of that nature. And I think that the recovery is going to be long. There's the immediate needs that we need to address and the long-term needs we need to address.
Just to clarify, and just so that everybody can hear this, so one of your areas in the state of Connecticut is one of the richest places in the world, right? And not just in the United States, but there are also pockets of poverty that we are seeing. And that's very sad. So let me ask Pastor Carl, when you think about that, how is it possible that in today's day and age, before COVID-19, that we could have a state that's not that big, have this kind of disparity and this kind of inequality? What does that say about society today, Pastor?
Well, in the Tale of Two Cities, it begins with it was the best of times and it was the worst of times. And I think that's sort of the description of Connecticut before, during, and I pray not after the COVID crisis. Of course, the southern part of Connecticut, Fairfield County, is adjacent to New York, close to the city, a train ride away. A lot of it's sort of like a bedroom city for New York, as are New Rochelle and other cities just along the Metro North line. So a lot of people have come to Stamford. Stamford has grown tremendously. A lot of money invested there. It's a global city. Where you go into other parts of Connecticut, and it's almost rural in some ways. There's a beauty about it. That's wonderful. But there's also a sort of sadness because industry hasn't reached there. The technology gap. There are parts of Connecticut that are not really wired correctly at this point. So those are some of the shortcomings that are there. All those things lead to challenges. One of the greatest challenges, though, is the education gap in Connecticut between the minority communities and the majority community, if you will. And that education gap has created a cycle that has led for people of color to often be underemployed or unemployed. And it's not just people of color. There are also indigenous folks like the other indigenous African American and Latino, Hispanic people that are in Connecticut that are Anglo and from other European countries by their first trip over to Connecticut or to the United States. But when we see that there's a sort of a worker class that's here, and there's an elite class that's here in Connecticut. And unfortunately, you know, the rich have it and the poor don't have it as much. And that's why we see the cycle in COVID as well, as we see it cycling down and impacting our community, you know, more in the poor communities and therefore in the often minority communities in Connecticut. So I think that's part of the challenge is just facing that, you know, on a daily grind of trying to, we were already dealing with an education gap. We're already dealing with a home ownership gap. We're already dealing with a healthcare gap in terms of the quality of services for poorer people and people of color. And now that's exacerbated tremendously by the COVID crisis and what's going on here in the COVID crisis. And we see the types of numbers that we see. You know, it's you're more than 2 times likely as an African American to get it and also to die of it. This last month has been a tragedy in that respect. Lots of good people, loving people. Now, life is a life. It's a black life, a brown life, a white life, a green life, purple life, whatever it is just as important as any other life. It's a family that's represented. It's a generation that goes without the type of love that comes from a mother, father, sister, or brother, or a child to a parent or a grandparent. So that's probably the most difficult thing, is to see what could be avoided in some ways if we did a better job of creating equity within our communities.
And here we are looking, Pastor, at this story, COVID-19, the black and brown battle in Connecticut. And when people hear about these stories and they look at this, they are frustrated by what's happening, not just in Connecticut, but all over the country. You've seen states with 15% Black populations that have 50% of their victims are African American. And what does this say about our healthcare system, Pastor?
Well, I mean, it says that there's an inequity there. I mean, the reality is that, you know, there are 4 key gaps in Connecticut, I think, and they exist around the country. First, there's the education gap, then there's the wage gap, then there's the home ownership gap, and that leads to the healthcare gap. People that can afford healthcare, people that can afford to get the type of initial service. You go to your doctor, call your doctor. Well, if you don't have a good healthcare system or health coverage, then you're calling a doctor who has 500 of you calling, as opposed to a doctor who has a really neat and tidy schedule, working hard to serve people who can pay more.
And that's something that we're certainly seeing. All the disparities in America are being exaggerated and put under the microscope right now. And we're seeing that. Let's see who else is watching. Jonathan Borstein has watched this show for 73 straight days. Thank you for being here, Jonathan. That's incredible. Lawrence Aaron says, interesting presentation from Hamilton Heights, West Harlem, Upper West Side, Lower Washington Heights, Manhattan. So he's got it all situated. And we're also joined by Lori, who says this is nice. Now, Neil Parekh says, watching from Springfield, Virginia. My wife is from Connecticut and went to school there. Go Wesleyan. So we'll use that minute just to talk about the education industry or profession that's there in Connecticut. It's one of the big businesses, right? We have education, you have medical systems. Representative, can you talk a little bit about that, about the kind of pillars of the economy of Connecticut?
So we have a few different pillars to the economy in Connecticut, and actually, interestingly enough, Connecticut certainly has its problems, but we are listed as one of the top 7 best positioned states to economically recover for being how hard hit we are. And the reason is that we have a strong manufacturing industry. We have both Sikorsky building helicopters for the government and Electric Boat building submarines, as well as an aerospace program. And during our shutdown, manufacturing was kept going for the most part, and so it kept our third largest growing industry going and kept paychecks in people's pockets. That said, we also have the bioscience industry, and we have a large service population, and that's really where we're hit so hard, and why we're having so many troubles is because so many people, are service workers, and we're shut down. And so it's an interesting situation that we're in as far as how we're going to find a path out of the woods. And I think that the pastor really hit the nail on the head, that this is laying bare a lot of the problems that were pre-existing, particularly having to do with wages and with, the cost of living, especially in an area like this. What we're seeing is the fact that, nationally, we're looking at 60%, there's a study that said that 60% of residents can't afford a $500 crisis. And that holds true out here too. We're looking at people who, there never should have been a situation where half of our residents didn't have any savings. And there never should have been a situation where, we have so many people that are under the ALICE designation or in poverty. The middle class has just been under attack for a really long time. And it's a big passion of mine is fighting for the middle class and rebuilding that. And I think that the hope is that after, once we get back on our feet, that we're going to build this better than it was before and make sure this doesn't happen again. I mean, I think about last year, and there was a 14-hour filibuster to try to stop us from raising the minimum wage. That's what we're dealing with in Connecticut.
Yeah, and that's really sad. Let's go to Pastor Yolanda for her thoughts. Let's see her. We're having a little trouble with your microphone, Pastor. Can you see if you can unmute that, or if you can try that one more time? We're having trouble with your audio, Pastor Yolanda. Let's see. If it happens again, maybe we'll log off and bring you back in just a minute. Please stand by. Folks, as you're watching, please tell us your questions. Please tell us where you're watching from. We're very grateful to all of you for watching tonight. It's a long weekend here in New York, but it's all blending together, isn't it, Pastor Carl? We would have been very difficult to get three of you together on Memorial Day weekend. And how has your life been changed? This is just one example that here we are on a Saturday able to do something like this. We're so grateful for your time, Pastor. Can you reflect on that for us, please?
Sure. There are probably three things that really are striking. The first is, let's call it a positive thing. We have to be closer to family again. And I think that's a value that's been lost, and the COVID crisis has driven us back together. You're doing Zoom calls and things like this with family to make sure they're okay. You're checking up on folks, and that's great. But the rest of it that surrounds it, that's the safe place in all of this. If you have a good place to live in, if you have a place to be safe in, and so many people don't. There's still homeless people, still people on the street. For us, the worship experience has changed dramatically. We're always online, Shiloh Church BPT, woo, on Facebook and on Instagram and on the YouTube channel. But now, because we're not able to worship in the church building itself, then we've been worshiping outside. We did the first drive-in church in Connecticut, which was great. And now we're moving to the Klein Memorial Auditorium for drive-in church every Sunday morning. That's it's an exciting experience because we're touching the community in a different way. The hard part of that is we see the need even more. We saw the need because of the outreach programs that we do, and that we're engaged in. I mentioned Pastor Yolanda and I have worked with Bob and Amy Stefanowski and Masks for Heroes CT. Shout out to that, because that group has just done a tremendous job distributing almost 1 million masks. We got a mandate from the governor. Everyone should wear a mask. But where do you get a mask from? You can go online and pay $30 for 5 of them. That's crazy when they cost 50 to 75 cents each. But shout out to Bob and Amy for putting that organization together and giving free masks to folks. That's been you've seen the good side of some people like that. You've seen the industrious nature of some of our legislators that have really dug in, like Representative Rochelle. Jim Himes, for example, has done a great job in keeping in touch with us and with folks. We've seen a lot of good things, but the challenge of worshiping away and not being there, having to deal with not being able to have families at funerals and things like that, it's just tragic. And not being able to visit someone that's in the hospital, we take that for granted. But when someone is there and that they're facing the possibility, a high possibility or probability of death, and you can't even go see them. That's a difficult, hold a row, as we used to say in the neighborhood back when I was a kid in Georgia. So those are some of the challenges, the economic challenges that shall face us. I mean, who are we kidding? We're going to pay for this at some point. We're getting this money now, and it's great as a bridge, but it has to come from somewhere.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. We have people watching around the world. Kavita's from New York, Michael from Cleveland. We see on LinkedIn, we have a guest watching from Nepal, which is so nice to have this global conversation. Pastor Yolanda is back with us. Pastor, tell me about the reality on the ground for your parishioners. What is the number one or two things that they're worried about right now?
Well, talking to many of them, as Pastor McCluster has said, the outreach has been very essential these past few weeks. We have not been able to do the drive-in because of the space. We don't have much space in near our community where the church is at, but we have done a lot of outreach, just talking to the people out in the streets and trying to feel, how they're seeing things and how they are dealing with it. Now, the people in our church, the congregants, because we have been speaking to them regularly, not only through phone, but also through Zoom, which we've gotten so used to doing, and getting back to the norm. I think we're going to be missing out on this Zoom also. But we've been hearing a lot of word when it comes to fear, just the trust factor, trying to get back and just trust. Not only at the church, because we've kept up with the disinfecting and the cleaning, and I'm sure every other pastor has also, but just getting out into the community, getting back into the restaurants, getting back into the stores, making sure that everything is disinfected, making sure that, that everybody is putting everything into perspective and obeying all the guidelines that the CDC has put on on call. And this is practically the number one thing. It's just the fear and just the trusting. I could say it for myself. I mean, would I be able to go into a restaurant? Good question.
Yeah, and this is something that we're all thinking about. By the way, Pastor McCluster, I love the idea of the drive-in sermons that you're doing. We're all adjusting and trying to learn how to get through this crisis. You're doing that. Let's go to our state representative who is here. Kara Rochelle is here. Kara, can you talk a little bit, please, about where we go from here? Now that things are starting to open up, what is the reality of where we go? And what are the politics like in Connecticut? Do you have your version of people who are trying to break through all the guidelines and trying to say that we have the right to, get sick because we want to do whatever we want? We don't have to follow guidelines. The pastor mentioned the importance of wearing masks, for example. What are the angry folks? Are there such folks in Connecticut as well?
So I think they're everywhere, and I think it's a bell curve, right? So there's the majority of people in this state, just like everywhere, just want to have their families safe and their friends safe, and want to, we all want to get through this and have everyone get through this safely. There are the folks, and the frustration is real. We all wish that we could be hugging our family and socializing and enjoying the summertime. These are normal things to want, right? And it's a normal thing to want your paycheck and to want to get your business back going. And so it's all about how people are handling it, and it's all about creating supports. So there have been some protests up in Hartford of folks that feel that their rights are being pushed upon. The courts have pushed back and explained that this is a public health emergency. And I think that it's important to remember this is the majority of people just want to get back to normal as soon as possible. And so as a state, what's being done is there's being a strong effort to use the public health officials as a guide, and to take a really scientific approach to what's safe, and to work with the business community on that front. There's a give and take, and a little bit of a day by day that happens. And so I'm happy to see that there is some flexibility, and that there's a give and take with the business community, and that for the most part, people really are pulling together the way that they should be. And we try to really explain to others to have that empathy and to have that big picture.
Yeah, thank you. And Rose is quoting Pastor Carl: "A black life, a brown life, a purple life is a life." He said earlier, as he said, about the importance of caring for everybody in our communities. And I'll ask Pastor Carl, one of the things that we hear from Senator Mitch McConnell is that we need to cut off these emergency benefits, because that'll keep people from looking for work, as if they are so lazy and they just care about getting a few dollars instead of caring about their ability to work and the pride that comes in work.
Well, that's what happens when people who've never had to wonder where the next meal is coming from are in charge. That type of idiocy, and I don't say it lightly. I mean it. I'd say it to his face, because the idea that someone and there are people that are dying. There are people that are dying. There are people that are homeless. There are people that don't have food. There are people that are elderly and are afraid to go out and don't have a way to get around. We have formed the Connecticut Faith Leaders Collaborative, which are the adjudicatory heads of all the major faith movements in Connecticut, and went to Governor Lamont because there was no mention and no reopening plan for the houses of worship in the state of Connecticut. I'm grateful to God that has been a response, and that now there's a plan that's being put into place, and we hope will go into place this week. We're not crazy. We don't want to run out and let everyone catch COVID, but there are people that need help. And the houses of worship, the houses of faith, have been one of the primary partners with the government and with the private philanthropic sector to really reach out and do things. So I'm just really dismayed. One of the things I said to the governor was that we need more people who represent the community broadly on the reopening committee, on every phase of work that's being done as it relates to reopening. Because I tell you what, I can tell you where the families that people have, I've been to those houses, I've been to the mortuaries, I've been to the cemeteries, and I've been to the food truck, and working with the Hartford Healthcare and Yale New Haven to try to make sure their food pantries can be open under these strange and unprecedented times. That's such an insensitive statement by the majority leader of the Senate. I'm just disappointed that there's not the realistic understanding or perspective of what's happening on the street. Maybe he ought to come to Bridgeport and spend a day with us and see what's going on. Maybe he ought to come to the streets of New York and see in some of the corners where people are huddled up. If it continued to be as cold as it was, then people would have died because they can't go into shelters. They can't go into places where they feel that COVID is running rapid. Why doesn't he go to a nursing home somewhere and see some people that are hurting in these nursing homes? We were ignorant to what was going on. I'm not putting blame on anyone for that, but we have to acknowledge that as a country, as a community of people, we were ignorant about what was going on early, and we're playing catch up now. So let's not kick people off the bus because it might cost you something. We're all supposed to be all in this together. And so, of the people, for the people, by the people, something like that, right? Where's that, Mr. McConnell?
Thank you very much for sharing your views. That's so important. Bill Carbone says, I went to Wesleyan and lived for a decade in Middletown, Connecticut. Most people think of Connecticut as all Fairfield, but Middletown has terrible issues with poverty, drug addiction, etc. It's very much a major city in micro, with the good and bad scaled down. Representative Carra, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we see this all over the state in various areas. I mean, if you're in New Haven, you can go from a Yale area and then turn a block away and you're into some distressed neighborhoods. And the haves and have-nots, it's really stark out here, and it's a lot of what's discussed in Hartford is those of us that represent communities where people struggle, where they need more resources, where they need better education funding and better wages and more economic development. And then the communities, we've got a situation where our wealthiest residents are taxed at a lower rate than our poorest restaurants. poorest residents, excuse me. You know, there's some economic justice that needs to be had, and there's some restructuring that needs to occur to get resources to the right communities, because rising tides bring up all ships, and everyone deserves dignity. And this has really laid bare a lot of what's happening across our state and across the country.
Thank you so much. When reading this note from Neil Parekh, State Representative Cara Rochelle has mentioned United Way of Connecticut and ALICE a few times. Thank you. ALICE refers to people who are asset limited, income constrained, employed. alice.ctunitedway.org. For people watching around the world to whom America seems like a place where there's so much wealth, even trying to get my tongue around that particular phrase, asset limited, income constrained, employed, is a way of saying, I guess, working poor.
Yep. It's people that are struggling to cover, you know, are they going to pay their car payment or to buy diapers for their child? Are they going to, you know, cover their rent, or are they going to let their electricity lapse? These are folks that are working hard and it just can't make ends meet. You know, we know from our United Way study specifically that the housing costs are too high, that the wages are too low, and that we have some structural changes that we need to make. You know, if you look at what structurally was occurring financially for residents in the 50s and 60s versus now, it's a very different landscape for workers in this country and in this state.
Yeah, and that's certainly a problem. Chris Gorman's watching from New York. Thank you, Chris, and thank you everybody for watching. Rose says Middletown, big dichotomy there. Let me ask Pastor Yolanda Hernandez to talk a little bit about her church and about her congregation. What are the people like there? What are their hopes and aspirations? We'd love to hear that. And also, what is your message on Sunday? Here we are on Saturday night. A lot of people are going to be watching the recording of this, but we're speaking on Saturday night before Sunday. Can you talk about that, please?
Yeah. Our message since the beginning of this season of COVID-19 has been a message of encouragement, has been a message of you could go forward. Please look at the future as being a positive future. I know that there's a lot of things that are going on, and Pastor Carl McCluster has said it very vividly, how our people are hurting. They are hurting, but even though they are hurting, they need to hear a word of encouragement. And all of us have every Sunday gone live, and that has been our message. Not a message of condemnation, not a message of pointing fingers, not a message of, of discouragement or look again at the news because the news hasn't been the greatest, but a message of encouragement, a message that, yes, we do see what's going on. We do see the crises, but we could still go forward. We could still go to the end and know that God is with us. That's important. Our church is a diverse church. We have like 17 different nationalities in our church. Again, I stress the fact that we are in a community that is very diversible. We are in a community where we see this every day. We see people that are going through hardship. We see people that are going through hunger. We see people that are going through pain. And there is really so much we can do. And we try to do our best. And that's all we ask, is that our people, it's like Pastor McCluster said, it doesn't matter who it is, whether it be a Hispanic, an Afro-American, an Anglo, it doesn't matter who it is. All of them will live a healthy and safe life.
Thank you very much. Let's go to Pastor McCluster. Let's hear some of your thoughts for tomorrow. What are you going to be saying? What is your, and also tell us about the Shiloh Church, please.
Sure. The Shiloh Church is actually also a diverse church. I think that's one of the things that Pastor Yolanda and I shared together. We were putting flags up around the property on the fence for every country. We ran out of flag posts from all over the African and Asian continent. My wife happens to be from Shatnapatnam, so in South India. And came doing her second master's at the University of Bridgeport.
Wait, I have to come in and say hello. That's amazing. That's awesome. So tell us her name, please.
Her name is Prabha Magapu.
Okay, and how's your South Indian languages since you've met her?
It is absolutely abominable, weak, and pitiful. Me and Babbel are working it out. Okay, I got the Babbel app, and I'm working on the Hindi to try to put it together. But we're a diverse church, and it really is challenging. You know, we see, you know, in Bridgeport, it's like the crossroads between Fairfield County and going up to some of the more challenging areas. The industrial degradation of the valley, the Connecticut Valley, Naugatuck Valley, really hit the state a while back, really and made it difficult. Now, I'll say one thing, and I give God the glory, and I agree with Pastor Yolanda. Our message is one of hope. You know, we have been blessed that not a single person at Shiloh has passed away or been infected with the COVID virus, and we attribute that to we have a theme. It's called Fighting Fear with Faith and Facts. In other words, we pray, but we also watch. We call on God, but we also do what we need to do to try to protect ourselves. And I think that's an important message. That's my message for tomorrow. And also, finally, I'll say this. So we're all in the same boat now. You know, you might have come from Italy. You might have come from, you know, from Ireland, like some of my way back ancestors, McCluster, you know, Scottish rather, from the West Indies or from South America or from Spain. But we're all in the same boat now, and I think that's the thing. That I'm an independent. I'm not a Republican or a Democrat. Been an independent for 30 years. Nothing against Republicans and Democrats, but I just feel that we need to realize that it's bigger than a party. And when it degrades into party politics, the people who are poor and less fortunate are the ones that suffer.
We're seeing on the screen here a comment from Hyderabad, India. Pastor Carl, greetings from South India. And we also have Seishu watching from Avon, Connecticut. I need to look at that map again to figure out where all of you are. And Susan says, "Hi, Seishu. Hello from a fellow HSC member." I have to think about that is exactly. And Neil is questioning my language skills and asking how good my Indian language skills are. My Hindi is pretty good, Neil. So we'll talk about that offline. And Anusha is watching from Short Hills in New Jersey. This whole area, the tri-state area, as we call it, you know, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, form one of the most important regions in America and the world in terms of economic, as an economic engine, but also a very creative part of the United States. And I want to ask Representative Cara Rochelle, what does it mean when this kind of cloud comes to this part of the world, as it has all over the world? What has surprised you most? You're a freshman politician. How has, you know, your day-to-day life changed, and what your hopes and dreams were when you got into office, and has your mission changed now that you have a different set of circumstances that you're looking at?
So I think that if anything, this has been really affirming of why I got involved. I used to, you know, when I was running, you know, I didn't come from a political background. My grandmother was the registrar of voters and used to say, "Honey, if you don't vote, you can't complain." But my dad was a public servant in a different way. He was a volunteer firefighter and a fire chief. And so he would run into the burning building and leave our family dinner to run in to help other people for free. And that really stuck with me growing up, that there is a whole organization of volunteers in my community that risk their lives to help others at all hours of the day and night, and don't do it for the glory, and do it to help people in their time of need. So that really impacted me in how I look at what public service is really supposed to be about. So for me, I kind of quipped when I was running that there's too many politicians in politics, that we need more people that have their feet on the ground, that are focused on the work. You know, I make it a point on my you know, rep page. I never discuss Democrat or Republican. I model that this is about the issues, and this is about the work that we're doing for people. I'm in that southwest corner, a little bit towards the center of Southwest. I'm about 20 minutes north of Pastor McCluster's church. So I'm in the Naugatuck Valley. Thank you for the shout out. And so, you know, my area is really, you know, the salt of the earth people, the hard workers. And what I've been most impressed with, and it's not just my region, but it's my region, it's the whole state, is how we're pulling together. There's that, you know, we are each other's keeper. We are each, you know, my neighbor's keeper. And that's really been lived out in real time, you know, from the people sewing masks for each other to the people dropping off food, posting up saying, hey, if you need anything, just let me know privately. There's been a really strong effort to come together, and I hope, pivoting to what we'll be doing legislatively, that as we navigate this financial crisis, that there will be an understanding that we are each other's keeper, and that the communities that have are going to need to help the communities that have not, because we're one state, just as we're one country. And so back to what Pastor was saying about Mr. McConnell, you know, we really need to come together as a country, and we need to come together as a state in order to make sure that we take care of everybody. That's the most important part.
I'll just say one thing about that. Thank you. I'll say that, you know, whenever someone says, gee, the president, you know, says something outrageous, and then they say, someone else responds and they say they're being political and everyone needs to not be political, we should point out that some specific folks have made this very political, right, over these last few months. And the worst, I think, has come out in the worst disparities in America, and the worst features of America have been exaggerated. Let's see here. Neil is saying that his Arabic is better than his Gujarati, my parents' Indian language. Neither is very good. I lived in Cairo for 2 years. In case people are wondering, Sri and I are good friends. Not only are we good friends, we work together on so many things. And I just will take this opportunity to remind everyone, tomorrow morning, Sundays, 8:30 to 10:30 a.m., every Sunday for 5 years, we've been reading the New York Times out loud like crazy people. We talk about the news, and tomorrow we have a wonderful guest. Corey Dean will be with us. Corey is the former science editor of the New York Times, and she's going to read the New York Times with us. So what a great opportunity to talk about facts. And we had Pastor Carl talk about how he fights fear with facts. I want to hear that slogan one more time, but this is tomorrow, 8:30 to 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. We'll be talking to a doctor and also to Cornelia Dean, the former science editor of the New York Times. If you have missed any of our shows, not just these daily shows that I do, but once a week we do this tremendous New York Times read along. Last week we had a Republican and a Democrat reading together the New York Times. We had Rick Wilson, who has been a strong critic of the president, but is a former or is a Republican himself. He and Steve Shale, who's a Democrat, both of them read the New York Times with me. That was last Sunday. This was the program last Sunday. And then tomorrow's program is with Corey Dean, former science editor of the New York Times. So let me go to Pastor Carl, and let's hear that righteous slogan that you have about fighting fear, please.
It's fighting fear with faith and facts. That's the theme, you know, and I hope everyone will pick that up. You know, listen, even if you were, if I was in the Christian Bible, I would say that Christ said, watch and pray, right? In other words, yes, pray, but you also got to keep an eye open, and we have to hold each other accountable. I'm passionate about it because people's lives are at stake. And when we break down to partisan politics, when something like this is happening, it does show the worst of us. But as I think that both Pastor Yolanda and Representative Rochelle has said, we've also seen the best of some people. Again, people like the Stefanowskis passing out free, 1 million face masks in the state of Connecticut, free. It's making sure people there are people that will be alive, you know, 20 years from now, because someone took the time. The work that Representative Rochelle is doing, Pastor Yolanda going, standing out on that street, she doesn't talk about it, in front of her church, passing out things, giving food to people, making a difference. And we see people doing these things now. We've seen some of the bad stuff, but we've also seen the best out of some of our citizens, and it really gives me the hope. Not just the hope I have in Christ, but the hope that it gives me for this country to really come together, fight through this thing, and get ready for the next thing, because there's another thing coming sometime soon.
There is, unfortunately. We have just a couple of minutes left, and we'll give each of you a chance to give us your final thoughts. I just want to read a couple of comments. Esteam says, doing a great job. Susan says, thank you, Pastor Carl. And Vandana is sharing. Rose Horowitz is tweeting live. Everyone, please follow Vandana Menon, Vandana_Menon on Twitter, and Rose Horowitz 31. She's the one who produced this show and did such an awesome job and brought us these great guests. Rick Botello asks, the COVID crisis has cracked open the ethical, political, economic, social, and healthcare injustices for our corrupt democracy? What strategies do you have to help us unite with truth, justice, equity, and freedom? So that's a great basis for a final set of thoughts from each of you. We'll start with Pastor Yolanda, your final thoughts and your thoughts on how you could do something as all of us try to be more united going forward. So Pastor Yolanda, over to you.
And what we've been saying all along is that just what Pastor Carl just finished saying. Faith is something that will keep us standing. And faith is what's going to help us just look forward and know that we're going to get through this. And there are people that know this, and there are people that are embracing this, and they're helping. Yes, there are volunteers out there, and there are people that are just showing up, and they're just helping, and they're cooperating, and they're donating, and they're doing everything that they can. Possibly in the month of December, no one would have thought about doing something as what they're doing today, as just embracing and just helping out. And again, faith is what will keep us standing and looking forward to know that God is with us. Again, thank you for having me tonight.
Remind us, thank you so much. Remind us of the name of your church and how people can learn more.
Our church is Center of Life, and in Spanish is Centro de Vida. And we're in, like I said, in Bridgeport. We're in 594 Harold Avenue. And also, I didn't mention, but I'm also president of the Association of Hispanic Pastors and Ministers of Greater Bridgeport. I've been president for this association for about 4 years, and I am working with like 50 to 60 pastors today, also helping out the communities. Again, thank you.
That's awesome. You're so modest that you didn't even mention that. So thank you for doing that, and congratulations on all you're doing, and thank you from a grateful community and a grateful country. Thank you very much, Pastor Yolanda Hernandez. Let's go to Representative Cara Rochelle. Your thoughts about that question and anything else you would like to share, and how people can find you.
So first I want to say that COVID can't stop good, that who we are as people is being asserted right now, who we are individually as citizens, as people in communities and across this country. We're defining ourselves as Americans first, and as people that look out for our neighbors right now. And that is the most important part of all of this, I think, is all of the ways that each of us has the power and the ability to protect each other and to care for each other. And so I'm encouraging everyone who's watching to get more involved in your community, whether it be to volunteer at a food bank or to help with, with handing out masks or anything else that you could think of to do, placing phone calls to seniors and checking in on them and saying, hey, I'm your neighbor. Is everything okay? Can I help you with anything? This is how we're going to get through this crisis. And it's also how we're going to, walk our country back from the polarized way that it's been, is to remember what this is supposed to be really about. And that's true of both public service in general and also in the political sphere. This is not a time for partisanship. It's just not. I mean, it never really should have been. This is a time to remember that policy is supposed to be for people. And that this government is supposed to be for people, by people. And so I'm really passionate about that. And I think a lot of people are, and that's more important than the partisan politics. So just to round it out, one thing I always say with my posts when I'm talking to people is I say, stay strong and stay kind, and COVID can't stop good. I'm reachable. My Facebook page is State Representative Cara Rochelle. I represent the Lower Naugatuck Valley and Sonia and Derby in Connecticut. It's a blue collar community. And I'm really proud of my area, and I'm really proud of our state for how we're all coming together.
Wow, that is awesome. Thank you so much. You're also on Twitter and on Instagram, so people can find you. Thank you very much, Representative Cara Rochelle. We're very grateful. I hear you've been working since 6 a.m. and on a Saturday or Memorial Day weekend.
I never stop.
I know you all are like that. So let's go now to Pastor Carl McCluster.
You know, if I was going to say any one thought, one message is that, I'd say it to Bridgeport, I'll say it to Fairfield and New Haven counties, I'll say it to Connecticut, to the region, and to the states, whole country, and to the world. We will either rise together or we will fall apart. If we come together, we can rise. If we keep bickering and blaming people, then we will fall apart. We've seen the great models of people like Bob and Amy, who I mentioned, Lynn Fasano, who's the Republican Minority Chair, Dave Lehman, who left a very lucrative job to come and work as the head of our Department of Economic and Community Development, and Governor Lamont, who's doing the very best he can in a very everybody who wanted that seat, watch out. It's a hot seat now. So it's not about we're all on the same side. We need to make sure we do that. And I ask you to embrace your faith, because for me, my faith, of course, comes God through Christ. But the Connecticut Faith Leaders Collaborative that came together to work with the governor on the reopening plan for houses of worship we are Catholic, we are Episcopalian, we are UCC, we're Baptist, we're Methodist, we're Lutheran, we're Sikh, we're Hindi, we're Muslim, we're every kind. We're Jewish. Jeremy Wiederhorn, who heads the Tri-Council of the Jewish rabbis, we're together for a reason. We're together. God has brought us together to help navigate these waters, and we need everyone. Whatever your faith is, exercise it, lean on it, trust in it, because and practice that simple thought: faith without works is dead. If all you're doing is talking, if all you're doing is complaining, then get off your behind and start doing something. Find someone that you can find someone to work together with. If you don't agree with somebody, find someone you agree with and do something good together. I think that if we do this, then we'll be prepared and we'll come out stronger. Then finally, united we stand, divided we fall. Let's stand together.
All right, that is awesome. Thank you. Pastor, where can people find you and the church?
Oh, yeah, sorry. Shiloh Church BPT on Instagram, Shiloh Church BPT on Facebook, and Shiloh Church BPT on YouTube. We have a channel, so you can see our services. They're live every Sunday at 10 a.m. from the Klein Memorial Auditorium parking lot, and also Bible studies and words for the day throughout the week. So Shiloh Church BPT everywhere.
All right, we love that. Neil says that interfaith group sounds amazing. Thank you. Rick says you're all amazing public servants. Seishu says, well said, Representative Cara Rochelle. Kavita thanks all the speakers. Rick says, faith and facts can conquer fear, but not sufficient to defeat fake patriotism. And I think he's absolutely right about that. So many great comments coming in, but we have to let these wonderful people go and let them have their evening back. I hope you get some rest. I know Sundays are very busy for the work that you all do to help people around the country, around the community, but of course, everywhere. Thank you very much. We'll say goodbye to each of you. Thank you very much. Our guest.
Thank you, Sri. Thank you.
Pastor Carl, thank you. And also to Pastor Hernandez, thank you very much. And to Representative Cara Rochelle, thank you. Bye-bye. What a great show, folks. Thank you to all of them for being here, for sharing their thoughts and their insights on a Saturday night. It's Memorial Day weekend here in the United States. That's the traditional start of summer. And we're just so grateful to all of you for being with us, for supporting us right now by watching our show. I want to also thank our sponsor and this very useful tool that we've put together, this platform of this free course, Fundamentals of Social Media from Muckrack Academy for journalists, PR pros, and everyone. A free certification course. Save your seat right now by going to mrac.co/social, mrac.co/social. Anyone, anywhere in the world can join us. It's free. It's about 2 hours with quizzes and fundamentals of social media. Everyone needs to up their game on social. And we're very grateful to Muckrack Academy for making this free for the entire world, where more than 3,000 people have already signed up. And we'd love for you to join us. Tell your family and friends, mrac.co/social. And with that, we're going to say goodbye. I'll be back tomorrow with 2 shows, 8:30 a.m. Eastern, with our show where we read the New York Times out loud with Cornelia Dean, the science editor of the New York Times, and her book, Making Sense of Science, Separating Substance from Spin. How timely is this book? And also her experience as science editor of the New York Times. And then tomorrow, 9 p.m. Eastern, every Sunday, our positivity show. And we have Patrice Tanaka with us. You're going to love meeting her. 9 p.m. Eastern tomorrow night. If you're watching this if you're watching a recorded version of this, you'll find all our archives on YouTube. Please go to YouTube. My channel is Sreenet, SREENET. You see it right on the screen, youtube.com/Sreenet. Please hit subscribe, and we'd love to have you join us. And then finally, I want to say to everybody who's watching, we appreciate you. Please send us your suggestions on speakers, suggestions on topics, guests, and also sponsors. We would love to keep taking this message out to the world. It's episode 73. Tomorrow's episode 74, and then episode 75. We'll turn it over to our audience once more, the way we did with episode 50, and have our audience speak on camera. So if you'd like to do that, please join us at 9 p.m. Eastern time on Monday night. Thanks very much, everybody. We'll say goodbye. We're really, really grateful to all of you for being here. Jonathan says he signed up for the fundamentals. Rose says, great show. Thank you, Rose, for bringing us Pastors Carl, Pastor Yolanda, and Representative Carla Rochelle. We're just so grateful to everybody. Good night all, says Susan Stein. And see you in the AM, she says. We're very grateful. Goodbye, everybody. Thank you.